Alrighty, well this video is specifically for my Ceramics 2 students at the high school. We were just getting ready to start the wheel project before schools closed. Part of our learning standards that we try to cover in level 2 is understanding basic concepts of the wheel. So what I'm presenting to you today would be the demo that I would give to my Ceramics 2 classes, introducing the wheel and introducing some of the basic forms and simple concepts. Students, you will be using this video to complete the assignment that is on our classroom page. You'll be answering some of the questions, and I will have the video times tagged to the questions so you can understand what I'm asking. So, hopefully you will find this informative. I am going to be covering some of the basic forms, such as a cylinder, how to shape a cylinder into a cup form, how to create a vase, a bowl, and a plate. So, let's start off with the wheels. Now, I have another video that I'm going to have my students watch, which is specifically on our wheels that we have at the high school. My wheel is different. My wheel is a kick wheel, a motorized kick wheel, so it does act a little bit different down by my feet. But the wheel head and the bats and everything that I'm using will be looking the same. So the first thing that I recommend is that you all use a bat mate. So the bat mates are back on the cart near the door called the Batmobile. And a bat mate is there to help keep your bat from shimmying about. I know many of you students have probably signed up for level 3 next year, so you're going to go into the wheel throwing class without even having touched the wheel yet. So this is all new for you, I understand. So the bat mate goes on underneath what is called the bat. Now the bat can be made of many different things. They could be plaster or wood. These are plastic, and they have little holes. Okay, see they have 2 holes, and they fit down over the bat pins. I didn't even mention that, but these are the bat pins. They are little pins that are drilled through the wheel head, and they're held underneath by little wing nuts. Now, the purpose of this, again, is so the bat doesn't shimmy or wiggle, because sometimes the holes have become enlarged over the years. Now, you want to start off at the wheel by having your clay already wedged. So I have balls of clay that are prepped here, and they are wedged and they are rounded. You don't want to come back and attempt to wedge your clay on the bat. It will get stuck and then it pulls the bat up. You want to do this back at your tables or on a wedging board. You also want to make it into a ball before you come back in here. You don't want to start off with a square piece of clay. You want a bucket of water, and you will have a few tools at your wheels that you can choose from to use. One of the only tools that you probably will need on the day that you're throwing would be the wooden knife, and possibly you might want a rib. And again, these would be in the tool bins. You will have a sponge in your water bucket. Okay, and you can have the water as warm water if you want. It's a little bit nicer. You will also have one of the orange microfiber towels that I keep at the wheels. They sit back on the stool of the wheels, and that's for your hands, to clean off your hands and such. Now, let's go ahead, and I want to get started here. The first thing that you want to do is anchor the ball approximately in the middle. So I'm going to take it and kind of thwack it down rather firmly, and you want it to be in the middle. If you have done it way off center, pull it back up, make it into a ball, try it again. Now, this next step I recommend for my students, because as a beginner, this is a very helpful step. Before I've added any water to anything, I've just taken my fingers and I've smooshed it down to the bat. What that does is it prevents water from going in under the edges, and that often lifts up clay. Like if kids get water underneath their clay comes off. So you want to be aware of that. The next thing is, before I add water, I take my hands and I'm just smacking it into a mountain, so it's approximately in the center. Now, you'll see that my leg is moving here. It's because I'm kicking my wheel. I'm trying to do as much without the motor as possible because my motor is very, very loud on this. Now that I have it sealed to the bat and I have it into the approximate mountain shape, now I add water. Now the left hand, oh, and I should say I'm right-handed, so my wheel is turning counterclockwise. If you are a left-handed person, you could reverse this whole thing and you would want to use a wheel that's reversed so it goes clockwise. If that is the case, the easiest wheel to reverse in my classroom are the 5 Pacifica wheels, the ones that are kind of like whitish or off-white a little bit. They have an easy toggle switch that reverses the direction. Again, please watch the video on the different structure of the wheels. That will be linked in this video and also in the assignment on our website. Okay, so I'm going to start off with my left hand doing the majority of the work. So I'm not even touching the clay with my right hand yet. I want you to notice that my elbow is tucked into my hip bone. Now, at our wheels at school, you'll probably find it easier to rest your arms on your legs. It doesn't work as easily for me here with the way that my kick wheel is, so I tuck my elbow into my hip bone or my side, okay? The key thing is you want your elbow to be locked. The biggest mistake that kids make is they have like chicken wing arms and their arms are out here to the side. If your arm is out here like this, there's no way that you can be stable and your hand is not going to be stable either. So locked elbow, and your goal is you want to kind of think about directing your pushing to the center point of the clay. So if I think about this as like a wheel and my arm is a spoke of the wheel, I want to push in with my hand, directing all my force from the base of my palm in toward the middle, okay? I'm going to turn this on now. Now, when you are pushing in, okay, you want to kind of hug the outside of the clay. So my outside finger, my pinky, and the outside of my hand, that's down against the bat. Now, I can also take my right hand and push against the bat on the outside, and notice that I have the sponge in the outside hand. You want to always add water. I have not addressed that. Water is key. Water is what keeps the clay slippery in your hands. If you don't have enough water, you will have friction. The clay will stick and grip to your hands and it will throw it off center every time. Okay. Just speeding that up again, and then I'm pushing it back down. Notice I'm using my left thumb. And the next step that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be coning, which will help center. I want to address my pressure down where my hands can touch the bat at the base of the wall. So I push in really hard. Again, my elbow is locked to my side. I'm going to take my right hand across from it. And as I squeeze my hands together, it comes up into a cone. Now, I'm going to push that down. Water, my left hand, my thumb wraps across the top, and that makes it go down. For beginners, I recommend that you cone it 2 to 3 times. And remember that you must have a lot of pressure right down here where it meets the bat. If that part isn't centered, you can't get the clay centered. One of the mistakes that my kids make quite often is they center this top part, but they're neglecting the base. The base is more important because once you get the base centered, then you can get everything else centered. Now, at this point, my right hand has only been doing kind of a pressure on the right. right? So I'm going to cone it one more time, and then I'm going to push it back down again. Okay, now on the right hand side, when I was doing that, I should mention that my right elbow is dropped to my leg. Now the last little bit of centering is to make this into a hockey puck. Currently it has a dome. I don't want it to be domed. I want to make it into a hockey puck. So, to make it into a hockey puck, I'm going to make a right angle. So my left hand is the side, it's pushing in. My right hand is going to be on top. So like a fist, like I would punch, except I'm going to lock it to my left. So notice how they're touching. They're going to be locked. There's not a gap between them. So with both of my elbows down, okay, I'm going to push in with the left and down with the right. And if you have already coned it, you should have a nicely centered piece of clay. Now, one of the big mistakes that students make sometimes is they have abrupt hand motions. So you can see I have this nicely centered now. You always want to have slow and deliberate hand motions. When you remove your hands, it should be slow. So let's do that again. I'm pushing in with the left, down with the right, but I took my hands off quickly. Notice I did not push when I took my hands off. I just took them off fast, and that's what will happen. So the most common mistake is not using slow, even hand motions. Okay, you can throw it off. Hands locked, elbows locked, and then you should be good to go. Okay, next, this is the centered hockey puck. So I put the clay on, coned it about 3 times, and then you bring it into center. You should not see a wobble at the base, nor should you see a wobble on the side, nor a wobble on the top. If you see a wobble in any one of those areas, you're not centered. So remember, elbows locked, okay, hands locked, pushing in with the left, down with the right. The next step is to drop the middle. When dropping the middle, lots of people use different methods. Okay, some people use 2 thumbs. When I first learned, I would use like my middle finger on my right hand, but there's a nice little trick that beginners find handy. If you take your left hand, which is the side hand, and you take your left thumb and you kind of gently guide it in, you're creating a little jig out of your hand. You've created like this little mechanism, this tool that enables you to push it in. Now be aware that you have to have enough water on there so you don't get friction. So I have now created an indent that is shaped like a V. So if I show you this, there we go. It's shaped like a V. Okay. Now I'm going to open it. So the interior width of the base is determined by whatever object I plan to create. So in this case, I'm going to make just a cylinder that I'm going to shape into a mug. So I want the interior opening to be the same opening width as the base of the mug. And I just compressed it there with my sponge. Now, once you open it, and I should have mentioned the thickness. Let me just hold this up. Okay, so there we go. That is now opened. When you open it, you will probably, as a beginner, need to check the thickness of the base. There is an easy trick, and I could have done this while it was still in the V before I opened it up all the way when I just dropped the middle. If I stick a needle tool in there, and then I slide my finger down against the shaft of the needle tool until my fingertip touches the clay, and then I pull it straight out, you can see from the tip of my finger to the tip of the needle tool, if you can see that, that's about 1/2 inch. And 1/2 inch is appropriate. 3/8 to an inch of an inch to 1/2 inch is typical for most trimmed feet. Okay, so continuing on. All right, so I've opened this up. It's about 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 inch thick. I've opened it up to the diameter of the base, that the base of the interior should be. Now, before I pull up, there is a little trick that I want to show you, and that is called recentering the wall. There is a poster in my classroom on the wall, and I'll link it in the video description for anyone that would like that. I have another video on how to recenter when you've opened it up and you need to recenter it. So I'll link that as well. So to recenter a wall, we need to create a channel through which the clay will pass. So if you can see, I'm going to create a channel with my left fingers on the inside, left thumb on the outside, and then my right hand with a sponge on the top. So as I grip this, I'm squeezing side to side with the left, pushing down with the right. Now, I was already centered, but let me just give you a for instance. Let's say I've opened it up and I've thrown it completely off. If I do this, left is squeezing side to side between the thumb and the forefinger, and then the right is on the top with the sponge. That can recenter it. Okay, once it's recentered, now I'm ready to start the pulling process. The pulling process is the first time your hand position is going to be slightly different. Up until this point, the left hand has always been on the exterior, but now my hands switch. So my hands are going to be on the interior and the exterior of the piece. So the left is on the inside, right is on the outside. If you imagine this as like the face of a clock, my hand position will be over here around, say, 4 o'clock. Maybe 3, 4, 5 o'clock. It depends on what feels best to you. But the clay will be spinning away from me, between my fingers and away. I would never put my fingers on this side and have it spin towards me. You could get your fingertips caught in there really easily. Okay, so my hands will be locked. My elbows will be locked. Again, you might lock your elbows to your legs. And you can use a sponge in the outside hand if you would like, but my hands are touching, my elbows are locked. I start by squeezing the clay at the base of the wall as I gently pull up on the wall. When I get to the top of that pull, I gently compress it. Now, the squeezing of the clay is compressing it, and that will make the clay go taller. So once again, I go down to the base of the wall. So my right fingers are on the exterior down against the base. I'm pushing against my left fingers on the inside as my hands come up the wall. There we go. That's a second pull. If you are trying to do pulls and you don't have any progress at all, that probably means you're not quite squeezing enough. Now, let's talk about the hand position. As I said, it was locked like this. The hand position is that your fingertips would touch each other if the clay weren't there. I happen to be using the sponge in the outside, but you don't have to. Make sure that you have plenty of water though. So my hand position would be touching if the clay weren't there, and I continue to pull up. You never stay in one spot for very long. You have to keep it moving upward. Okay, and that is a pull. Now, I do want to show you one little trick that I've seen before. Okay, I'm going to make a little line on this. Okay, that line, let's see if you can see this. Okay, can you see the line? The line is there to show how quickly I'm pulling. So let's go ahead and get this going again. I'm going to make another pull. Now, if I am pulling too quickly, which this next pull is going to be way too fast, okay? If I pull really quickly, I often get a spiral and the line is still visible, okay? So if you are pulling too fast, that can be a problem, okay? So instead, I'm going to correct that. And I'm going to use my sponge again in the outside hand. I'm just going to pull straight up. Nice slow and steady pull. And the line is completely gone because I allowed my hands to kind of like, I was compressing over the same area. I was going slowly enough as I pulled up. So that's a good little trick. That's a shout out. Thanks Sean Feltz, who I picked up that little trick from. That's a great little trick for beginners to understand how fast or how slowly they should be pulling. Now you can see that my cup is starting to angle outward ever so slightly. If you're trying to get something that's super straight, okay, you can always do a slight, and you don't want to rely on this too much, but you could do a slight collaring. So if you wet it down and pull up from the bottom, you can see how you can straighten it up again. And the trick in allowing it to stay totally straight, I usually tell my kids, is you might occasionally allow the outside hand to precede the inside hand, so it's kind of directing it inward. There are different tricks that different potters do, but that's a little trick that I do. You can obviously leave a spiral that is, you know, on purpose. Oh, I just kind of expanded that out a little bit with sticking my sponge in there on accident. All right. Now, let's talk about how a cylinder, a straight cylinder, can be altered. Almost everything is thrown from a cylinder, with the exception of plates. I show a totally different way for a plate. So once you have it thinned, then shaping is done after thinning. Now, even with a bowl, I make it in a cylinder, but it's usually wider to begin with. Okay, so let's say I wanted to flare this out and give it a belly, but maybe I want to keep the top the same diameter. Again, I'm going to add moisture. I'm going to start a pull down here at the bottom, but I'm going to let my interior fingers kind of precede the exterior fingers. And then I'll reverse it. Now the exterior precedes the interior. So that little bit of a difference where you push a little bit harder, maybe with the inside, a little bit harder with the outside, that can change your direction. It makes a big difference. Now you can use things like ribs if you would like to use a rib. In lieu of your fingers, beginners usually find this a little bit trickier because you don't have, you know, a natural sensitivity as a beginner, but I will just show you that ribs can be used to sometimes refine the form. Maybe I want to put a bit of an angle on it there. And you can do stuff like that with the use of a rib. Okay, before I call this one done, I'm going to soak up the puddle, because if you have any water that's left in the bottom of a form, it will weaken it. It will weaken the clay and potentially crack it. All right, so we've gone over the basics. Now that I've shown you how you can take a cylinder and then shape it a little bit, let's go with a slightly easier form. We're going to go with a cup. Now, for my students, when you guys are beginners, I always allow you to keep your pieces on the bats. You just write your initials in the bat on the slip. But for the purpose of me being in my small home studio, I'm going to remove this. So I just got the slip off my hands and I'm setting it over on a board that I have here. Okay, next we're going to do the same process. I'm going to go faster though, and this is going to be a bowl. Again, no water until I have it sealed and pounded into a mountain. So just like before, I start off with my left hand on the side and water. I focus the attention at the base of the wall where the clay is meeting the bat. And then I'm coning it. Now notice whenever you cone, keep that left elbow locked. Your hand is making sure that the wall is stable down there at the bat. And the clay is always domed when you cone it. You never want an indentation in it when it's coning. Okay, now that I've coned it 3 times, again as beginners, I recommend that. Now I'm going to make it into the hockey puck form. Both my elbows are locked. My hands are locked together. So I'm going for a flat top, flat side. Okay? When you have a centered hockey puck, no wobble, top or side, then you're ready to move on to dropping the middle. When I drop the middle, I'm going to use my thumb of my left hand and push it in. I could then stop the wheel, check it for the thickness, make sure it's about 1/2 inch thick. I don't need to do that on mine because I know it is. Now I'm going to pull this open. I'm going to speed up my wheel again with this. The big thing about a bowl that's different than a cylinder is as I pull it open, I want to be aware that I want to have a bowl that is scooped and rounded on the bottom. So as my fingers come towards me, I'm pulling upward. So the bottom of the bowl is going to be scooped. Okay, it's not going to be flat with a corner. It's going to be scooped. I'm going to take my sponge and compress in here. And let me show you. All right, so the difference is there's not a corner, it's rounded and scooped. Okay, now when I begin to pull up on this wall, because it doesn't have a corner in there, my fingers don't go in as far in the middle part because it's scooped and rounded. I did widen it up just a smidgen there. I wanted to have the bowl just a little bit wider. And now I'm just going to pull it straight up. Although I am kind of going underneath the angle right down here. I kind of pushed in quite a bit because I have a lot of clay at the base of the wall, so I wanted to pull that up some. There we go. Now, oh, I did not mention this, but this piece of clay was 2.5 pounds. So 2.5 pounds can give you a very sizable bowl. Like this would be a nice sized salad bowl. It's probably a little bit big for an ice cream bowl unless you want a ton of ice cream. I'm gonna do one more pull. Just to thin it out a little bit more. And shaping it. So what I just did then was I just pushed it a little bit from the interior. I should have mentioned that before I did it. So on that final pull, I kind of pushed it to like curve it out just a little bit more. I'll do that one more time. I'm pushing a little bit more with the inside hand to give it a little bit more of a belly, a little bit more of a curve. With it spinning, I'm going to get the water out of the bottom. And I've not really addressed that, but never touch the clay on the wheel unless it's spinning because you'll throw it off. Like if I had the wheel stopped and I start wiping it on the inside, you're going to throw it off. Okay, then I'm going to trim away some of the extra here. All right. And This one is a little wide, so I think I will actually leave this one on the bat, but I definitely need to cut it. So every time you throw something, even if you leave it on the bat, you want to cut it, and you can stop the wheel. It doesn't have to spin while doing that. But you want to make sure that the wire is pressed firmly against the bat as you do that. All right, so that one is done. So I've done a cylinder, and then I shaped the cylinder into a cup. I've done a bowl. Next, I'm going to do a plate. The plate is a little bit bigger. With my students, I always tell them a dinner plate should be, think like a very small cantaloupe. So maybe 3.5 pounds, 4 pounds. 4 pounds is what I use for a standard dinner plate with a trimmed foot. So I smooshed it into the mountain. And for this one, again, I'm going to concentrate my efforts at the base of the wall as I cone it, and then push it down, and then efforts at the base of the wall, cone it, push it down. Remember that you always have to be centered at the base of the wall before you can move on. Now I'm making this into the hockey puck. Okay, here's where it all is different with a plate. A plate gets flattened out into the flat disc, and then the wall is raised. So I'm going to flatten it out until it's only probably about 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch in height. That's the entire height of the disc. So you want to flatten it out so you still have, you know, about 3/4 of an inch of thickness at the base. If you're trimming a foot, it's going to be really important that you have 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm just kind of squeezing and compressing the outer edge. Now, this particular piece is centered. I'm fine to make a plate directly from this, but I want to show you a really awesome trick. So this part is where sometimes kids get this far, but they've thrown it off when it comes out and the edge is a little wonky. So this is the cool trick where you can take a wooden knife, and as long as your top part is completely flat. So let me just do this as a example. So if I'm using like this big old platter rib, and I make sure that my top is flat, okay, so my top is nice and flat. If I have an off-centeredness in my edge, I can then cut it off with a wooden knife. So let me show you how. Take 2 hands, hold it firmly, drop it slowly, cutting off the outer edge. So as long as the top was even before you did this, if you cut off the outer edge, you've now cut off your off-centeredness. Now this is not a necessary step. It was not necessary for my piece right now, but I just wanted to show you how. It's a great little trick for a beginner to have a nice even plate. Now, let's talk about how to make this look like a plate. To raise the rim, I'm going to add a little water. I'm going to take my dominant thumb, so my right thumb. I hold my hand with my left hand as well. I press down against the bat, so my nail was actually like down against the bat as I was pressing. And this raised a little bit of clay here. So I'm going to add some water to this. And I'm doing the whole recentering of the wall. I did not mention this before, but when I recenter the wall, I call this the duckbill, like whack, whack, okay? So if you squeeze side to side with the left and compress down with the right, now you have recentered that wall, and you have a wall that you can thin. So this is a smallish plate. Again, this was only about 3.5 pounds. So I can just gently squeeze and do a pull. When I get to the top of the pull, then I just compress that edge, okay? Now you can modify the angle of this with a tool, with your finger, with a rib. I'm going to angle this outward a little bit more, okay? So it was a wall and now I just angled it. Now, one of the key things with a plate is always leave adequate support at the base of the wall. Don't thin it out too much. The wall should go down and get a little bit thicker right at the bottom, because you have to have that support when you're making a plate, because if you have that angle of the, like a flange that sticks out, you don't want it to collapse. So here I'm just taking a red rib and kind of compressing this transition a little bit. There we go. You could certainly do something like a spiral if you want to. You could do this on any sort of form. I'm just going to take my sponge, add a little bit of water, press right in the middle, and then I have like a little spiral that I just put in there. Spirals catch glaze a little bit. Okay. If you wanted to do something like a flat sort of a flange, you can take a tool. So right here, I'm just going to do a little bit of a angle change right on the rim. There we go. So it's just a little delicate flat edge there. Okay. Now, for a plate, for my students, keep your plates on the back. Don't attempt to take it off. I'll just trim away a little bit of the excess right there. I'll cut that one. And I have one more form to show you. And I know this seems like I'm showing you guys a lot, but this is exactly what I would show you in class. If we actually had a class bell, I would be showing you all of these. Oh, I can't believe I just did that. I just had to stick that back on to fix it, because as I was picking it up, I was careless and I bumped it with my hand. There we go. Okay, so this time when I pick it up, I want to get something underneath there, close to one of the bat pins, like edge of a rib. There we go. Okay, that one came off. And last one is going to be a vase, because vases are always requested. Students always want to like make a vase for their mom or something.
And I am again going to use the same process, coning, focusing on the base of the wall as I cone it, and then eventually bring it down into the hockey puck once it's centered.
Now, when I just made that first pull, I didn't even really mention this before, but I did a squeeze between my left thumb and forefinger as I was compressing the top of the wall. Now, I want to try to keep the top of this narrow, because if this is a vase, I want to keep the top narrow, and I'm going to show you a couple of fun little tricks. Now, sometimes when you put your hand in there, it's going to make it a little wider, just because your hand will widen it up, but I can re-narrow it. Okay, so right down here at the base, I'm now going to shape the bottom of this by pushing out a little bit. I'm going to create like a little bit of a belly. This is a very small little vase. This was only about 1.5 pounds, about the same that I did for the cup. And then going to get the puddle out of the bottom. Okay, and now I'm ready to start to make it a little bit more narrow. So when I make this more narrow, I'm going to make sure I have water on there, and I'm going to do what's called collaring. So just I start from lower and I pull it in. So one bit of collaring now needs compression after that. Whenever you collar something, you want to follow it up with a pull of compression, because collaring is going to throw it off a little bit. Collaring will have a tendency to perhaps warp it a little bit, so you don't want to collar too much at once. You do one bit of collaring, then a pull, and then I'm going to do another bit of collaring. So I'm definitely going for a vase that has a belly and a skinnier neck. Do one more collar. There we go. And one more pull. I'm going to take a little bit off the top. Just to make sure that's all evened up. There we go. And then I just want to thin this edge, so I'm squeezing between my left fingers, and I was kind of compressing it on top with the right. Going to take away a little bit of the thickness down here at the base. I'm going to get a little bit of my slip off of there. I'm using the metal baby rib. Very gentle, because of course my hand's not on the inside. Okay, now here is my vase form, but I have a fun little surprise that I want to show you. And this is how you can blow the vase form and get it just a little bit, with a little bit more volume. So this is my last form that I'm doing, and I'm going to blow directly into this, and if it works right and my walls are thin enough, it should kind of blow up a little bit like a balloon. I have my towel handy because I'm going to wipe my mouth off. You ready? Here we go. 1, 2. And that one little trick of blowing into it adds a little bit more volume. It's kind of, the trick is also stopping before you blow a hole in it, which I've done before. In fact, I have a video where I blew a hole in it. So that one being kind of thin, I might just leave this on its back too. I will come back and show you what we would do when they're leather hard. That will be next week's viewing that you guys will watch. So hopefully this was a helpful little tutorial for you to understand a little bit about what we're doing on the wheel. I am so sad that all of my students from this spring semester in Ceramics 2 won't have the chance to get on the wheel because of the coronavirus. So I hope that many of you decide to take level 3 wheel throwing in the future so you can give it a shot. Take care. Hope you all stay safe, stay healthy, and keep potting if you can.